Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Federal workers were blasted by Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe for trespassing on farmland. Political reporter Brian Lilly has the details. Ukrainians around the world are celebrating Ukraine's Independence Day despite a war with Russia now entering its 7th month. And an event is coming up in Lethbridge that is hoping to supply 1,000 shoes for kids in need as students head back to school.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. A 24-year-old Lethbridge man who was reported missing on Wednesday morning was found dead earlier today in the River Valley. Lethbridge police, along with search and rescue, were down at Indian Battle Park earlier on Wednesday looking for Kyle Zadnik. His family had not heard from him since Monday and were concerned about his well-being. Zadnik's death is not considered suspicious, and police will not be releasing any further information. The Alberta government announced more support for projects and programs that prevent crime and help keep Albertans safe. Justice Minister Tyler Shandro says $5.2 million will support a wide range of groups over the next couple of years to fight crime here in the province.
Eligible projects and initiatives would include programs that deliver crime prevention, community safety, and well-being services, projects that deliver youth gang prevention and exit programs, and work which enhances skills, knowledge, and capacity of organizations focused on crime prevention. Now, eligible groups and organizations can submit their applications starting today until September 30th.
Shandro says the Alberta Crime Prevention Grant will help fund many groups across the province whose mandate it is to help keep Albertans safe. Alberta RCMP confirmed that they are investigating after UCP leadership candidate Leila Ahir's social media accounts were hacked. Ahir, who was elected in the riding of Chestermere-Strathmore in 2019, says both her personal and Facebook accounts were compromised. In a Twitter post, she called it a targeted attack where inappropriate messages were sent. An emotional Ahir says her account was being used for sexual exploitation and that, quote, "we will find the perpetrators."
I am running to be Premier of this province and to lead the people of Alberta. So to whomever perpetrated this attack on myself and my family, you will not win. I will not back down.
Calgary police are investigating another shooting in the Stampede city. This one occurred in the southeast part of Calgary in the community of Radisson Heights. Officials have not released any further information regarding injuries or the people involved. Police say it is the city's 97th shooting this year. On Monday, officers were called to another shooting in Pine Ridge where 2 vehicles were involved. Fortunately, no one was injured. There were also 2 shootings in the city on Sunday. Well, here in our city, we saw more shower activity in Lethbridge, good for our farmers in the region, but it's put a little bit of a damper on the Whoop Up Days festivities in the city. Jeanette Rocher is in now with an early peek at the forecast. Jeanette, the rain has been felt everywhere, including a flash flood in Fort Macleod.
Yeah, this moisture should last another day or so, Hal. And then it's sunshine and warm temperatures again expected on Friday. But before we get there, we can expect a 30% chance of showers this evening with the risk of a thunderstorm. Some fog patches developing overnight. Overnight low of only 11 degrees. And to Thursday, tomorrow, those fog patches should be dissipating in the morning. But expect a 60% chance of showers with the risk of a thunderstorm and a high of only 19 degrees tomorrow. All that before we get back into the sunshine. I will have that 7-day forecast coming up for you later on in the show.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. Indigenous dancers put their best feet forward on Wednesday afternoon during Whoop Up Days. The Lethbridge and District exhibition Powwow and Princess Pageant is showcasing dancers from across the Blackfoot Confederacy who are going head-to-head for some pretty big cash prizes. Video journalist Micah Quinn is at Exhibition Park to take in the grand entry and Powwow. Micah, exactly how much money are we talking about here?
Well, Hal, participants will be dancing hard for total cash payouts of $65,000. Organizers of the event say there are a wide variety of categories dancers will be competing in.
For example, with the men's, it's always like men's traditional, men's fancy, the chicken dancers, also ladies traditional, ladies fancy, and ladies jingle dress. So each of those categories are spread out across all of the different age categories, right from the tiny tots to the juniors to the teens and to the adult categories, and including the seniors as well. What we wanted to do, we wanted to also have included in our powwow a men's buckskin special. So the buckskin outfit will also be featured as a special in the powwow here today.
The event is taking place at Exhibition Park until August 25th at 7 p.m. Back to you, Hal.
Thanks so much, Micah. By the way, the town of Colehurst Miners' Days is coming up this weekend. A number of events will be taking place beginning on Friday. Now, an official with the Colehurst Recreation and Culture Committee says Miners' Days is a great opportunity for kids as it's the town's last event before children head back to school.
Miners' Days is a really great opportunity for us to bring the community together and just really kick off the fall with some excitement. With the kids going back to school, I know it can be a stressful time for everyone, and like wrapping up the summers can kind of be sad. We kind of make this party, this Miners' Days party in the park, movie in the park, parade, everything. We try to just lead the summer with a big bang so that we can bring our community together and just show that we're all in this together, and like, let's have some fun.
All of the events for Miners' Days are free, and more details can be found on our website, bridgecitynews.ca. Shoes are something many of us take for granted. There are many in Canada who are not able to access adequate footwear. This is especially tough for families in need as children head back to school. The Shoes for Kids YQL event is coming up Saturday, where residents are asked to donate new shoes to help out children in kindergarten through grade 12. Lethbridge Police and members of the Watch will be helping out at the event. One of the organizers, Monica Cove, says it will be a drive-through drop-off with cash donations also accepted.
Last year, we had well over 450 pairs of shoes donated at our event. This year, we're hoping to double that. We know that the need in the community is greater this year with so many immigrant families joining our community and so many parents that have been affected by COVID that the children now are the ones in need of returning to school with the brand new shoes.
Now, you can drop off shoes at the NMAC Centre on Saturday from 10 a.m. till 12 p.m. Wednesday marked Ukraine's Independence Day. In 1991, Ukraine issued a declaration of independence to separate from the Soviet Union. Later that year, Ukrainians voted to become an independent nation and move away from Soviet rule. It's also been 6 months since Russia invaded Ukraine, and the ill effects of the war are being felt everywhere, including right here in Lethbridge. There will be a special flag-raising ceremony at Lethbridge City Hall on Wednesday to honor Ukrainians. Bridge City News will be there, and you can catch the full story on Thursday's 5 p.m. newscast. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney says our province continues to stand with Ukraine and has donated millions of dollars in humanitarian aid, which includes funding to help evacuees with living expenses, learning English, access to childcare, and helping refugees find work.
Alberta has stepped up to the plate with $11 million of humanitarian and non-lethal military aid to support the Ukrainian Territorial Defense Forces, as well as welcoming hundreds, I expect thousands of evacuees to the safety of this province, and we will be doing much more. So to all of those who are celebrating today, even during the darkness of this Russian invasion, we can see the remarkable strength of the Ukrainian people in their resistance. To all of them, we say thank you and Slava Ukraini.
6 months after Russia invaded Ukraine, the war has slowed to a grind. Both sides are trading combat strikes. In central Kyiv, battered tanks are on display, which is a different military parade than Moscow originally planned.
Я вважаю, що ми точно переможемо, і насправді це дуже гарно, що зробили таку виставку, тому що патріотичність піднімається ще більше і більше, і знаєте, навіть отак ходиш просто і хочеться зірватися і туди побігти, і всім допомагати, дуже піднімає бойовий дух. Я вважаю, що все буде добре.
All of this week in Ukraine, there certainly is a parade of Russian military hardware in the center of Kyiv, but these are damaged, burnt out Russian tanks and other hardware that the Ukrainians have taken from the Russians as they retreated.
A Ukrainian police lieutenant remembers dramatic scenes from the early stages of the war with Russia. He talks about the evacuation of Irpin underneath a destroyed bridge where thousands of people fled relentless attacks.
Це була, можна сказати, дорога з пекла. Ми людей звідсіля виводили, тому що там було дуже жахливо. Там прилітали бомби, снаряди, стріляли. Всі відчули, побачили, як народ може бути єдиний, і в голові все змінилося, і цінності в житті всі помінялися. Починаєш розуміти, що можна було втратити.
A new hydrogen pact signed by Canada and Germany will help to kickstart a transatlantic hydrogen supply chain. Government officials say the first deliveries are expected in just 3 years' time.
The Canada-Germany Hydrogen Alliance is a historic step forward for our shared future. Our target is clear, working towards initial exports of Canadian hydrogen to Germany by 2025. And our outcomes are clear as well, creating middle-class jobs and local growth while delivering clean energy that will help fight climate change. This is a modern alliance for a modern world, where a healthy environment and a healthy economy go hand in hand.
Ottawa's recommendation that farmers in Canada cut fertilizer use by 30% is not sitting well with many in our rural communities. Stuart Boovey, who is a dairy farmer and chair of Alberta Milk, says if producers cut their fertilizer consumption by that much, the price of milk will be going up.
It's really handy to go after fertilizer, and they're actually going after fertilizer emissions, which are not even measured, right? And say, well, we're going to cut fertilizer use by 30%. Well, as a farmer, that's a unique challenge, but I'll tell you right now, that will increase prices. The reason fertilizer gets used is it's an efficient way to grow more feed per acre. That's what it is. So if you say you want to use less, that's fine. But then the cost per acre goes up, which translates right into a higher cost of milk in my industry.
Stuart Boovey, the chair of Alberta Milk, will talk more about the state of Canada's dairy industry coming up after Business News. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe blasted federal officials for trespassing on farmers' land. Apparently, the federal workers were collecting water samples, checking out nitrate levels. Political reporter Brian Lilly says this may just be a case of a little misunderstanding.
Environment in Climate Change Canada says their workers were not trespassing, that they've been collecting water samples like this for a long time, that it's not related to nitrate levels, that they were trying to collect water samples for Health Canada. So a bit of confusion there, a bit of back and forth. According to officials with the Saskatchewan government, they first learned of this last Wednesday, and then they changed the law about trespassing in Saskatchewan by an order in council, that's an executive order by cabinet, to include the government in right of Canada or persons in right of Canada, meaning a government worker could be considered trespassing.
Mr. Lilly will also have an update on if the federal government will be offering more financial help to provinces when it comes to health care. He'll have details coming up in the second half of our program. Critics are disappointed in the Saskatchewan government's plan to put $500 into the pocket of every resident over the age of 18. The province is awash with cash, and the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation says the tax credit checks could have been better spent in the school system. The Federation says school divisions have been crying out due to a lack of resources. The provincial NDP says the Saskatchewan Party should have probably provided relief months ago, criticizing the Moe government for sitting on billions of dollars of windfall revenues. A series of heat warnings are covering many parts of British Columbia. Environment Canada says daytime highs near 30 are expected in Terrace and Kitimat. On Vancouver Island, the Weather Office says the temperature could hit 34 degrees. The same high is being forecast for the Sunshine Coast from Gibsons to Powell River. Environment Canada says cooler temperatures should arrive beginning on Friday. Ontario Provincial Police say more than 250 people have been killed in land and water collisions so far this year. Officials say 259 people lost their lives on roads, trails, and waterways since January, including 19 fatalities last week alone. The OPP say fatal stats are up this year in areas like distracted driving, impaired driving, and people not wearing safety belts. There have also been a 300% increase in bicycle fatalities so far this year compared with 2021. It was on this day that Hurricane Andrew hit Florida. British and Canadian troops burned Washington in the War of 1812, and Pete Rose was banned from baseball for life. This is Today in History for August the 24th.
August 24, 1992. Hurricane Andrew smashes into Florida, causing record damage for that time. 55 deaths in Florida, Louisiana, and the Bahamas are blamed on the storm. 1814. British troops invade Washington during the War of 1812. They burn the White House and the U.S. Capitol, forcing President James Madison to flee the city. 1932. Amelia Earhart begins a journey that makes her the first woman to fly solo nonstop from coast to coast. The aviator takes off from Newark, New Jersey, and lands in Los Angeles 19 hours later. 2006. Astronomers remove Pluto from the solar system's list of planets, reclassifying it as a dwarf planet. And 1989. Baseball's all-time hits leader, Pete Rose, is banned from the game for life. The move follows allegations that he bet on games while manager of the Cincinnati Reds. Years later, Rose finally admits his gambling while pressing for his ban to be lifted.
I'm interested in getting back down on the field and teaching the game of baseball, because I don't think baseball is being played the right way today.
Today in history, August 24th. Sandy Kozel, The Associated Press.
Light rain continued for many parts of southwestern Alberta today, and more of the moisture is on the way. A full look at the weather picture is coming up. We had a cooler and wet day in Lethbridge. The moisture is welcomed by our farmers and producers, but not so much by those taking in the Whoop Up Days festivities here in the city. Jeanette Rocher is in now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, if folks are wanting a drive visit to Exhibition Park, Friday may be the best day?
Yeah, Hal, Friday is the day we will see the sun shine again. I have to admit, it felt kind of chilly out there with the only 20 degrees or so compared to the 30 that we've been having. Behold, though, that weather is coming again. Not tomorrow, though. Thursday, we're looking at a 60% chance of showers, high of only 19 degrees. There is a risk of a thunderstorm tomorrow as well. Friday, there we go. There it is. Sunshine, 27 degrees the high. Then back into Saturday, we're seeing showers again, high of only 22. And then we're seeing sunshine again Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Look at those temperatures climb as well. Sunday, 24, up to 30 degrees on Monday, and all the way up to 32 on Tuesday. So it looks like we are kind of in a little roller coaster effect. The average high for this time of year, though, 25 degrees, average low 9 degrees. 37 was our high temperature on this day back in 1969. And in 1992, we had our chilliest, which was only 0 degrees. Sun rose this morning, 6:35 a.m. and 9:32 is when the sun sets this evening. Just like that, we are under 14 hours of daylight, sitting at 13 hours and 57 minutes. So there you go. It's happening fast, folks. 25 the high in Victoria tomorrow. Going to feel more like 19 though on the coast, and a bit windy in the Wanda-Fuca Strait. 26 the high in Vancouver with sunshine and haze. 28 in Edmonton, sunny skies, also a bit hazy as well. 23 the high in Calgary tomorrow, fog dissipating in the morning, and sunshine for the rest of the day. In Saskatoon, sunshine, 28 degrees, a 20k wind. 24 the high in Regina tomorrow with the sunny skies and winds up to 20 kilometers per hour. Same thing exactly for Winnipeg, high 24, sunshine and 20k winds. As we look to the central part of the country, we're looking at 40% chance of showers in Toronto, risk of a thunderstorm, 28 the high. 25 the high in Ottawa tomorrow under sunny skies, a bit hazy in the afternoon. 25 the high also in Montreal with a mix of sun and cloud there. As we look to Atlantic Canada, we're seeing more showers, more drizzle expected. 27 the high in Fredericton, 24 in Halifax, 26 the high in Charlottetown tomorrow, also expecting a thunderstorm there. 25 the high in St. John's, Newfoundland with a 40% chance of showers and 20 to 40k winds there. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Analysts say new agreements between Ottawa and two German automakers could help fund new mine development here in Canada. The agreement signed with Volkswagen and Mercedes-Benz helps secure their access to Canadian graphite, nickel, lithium, and cobalt. Experts say such agreements show that Canada is capitalizing on its battery supply chain potential and emerging as a dominant player in the electric vehicle battery industry. Mixed signals are emerging about travel in Europe heading into the fall and winter seasons. British Airways says it is cutting around 10,000 short-haul flights in and out of London's Heathrow Airport through March, while Gatwick Airport is ending its cap on daily flights. Airports around the world, including Pearson and Mississauga, Ontario, have run up against staffing shortages that have caused long lines baggage delays, and flight cancellations. Gatwick said it increased traveler capacity and recruited more than 400 new security staffers to reduce delays. Macy's is trimming expectations as it faces a glut of unsold inventory that has impacted almost the entire retail sector. The New York-based department store chain earned $275 million in the 3-month period ending July 30th. That compares with $345 million a year ago. Sales also slipped roughly 1% to $5.6 billion. A new survey of just over 2,000 Canadians says 72% of millennials would buy a home in their current city if the cost of living was not a problem. The study done by Royal LePage also says 68% of non-homeowners aged 26 to 41 say buying a house is an important life goal for them. Many, however, are quite concerned that their current salaries are not enough to cover a down payment and a mortgage. 58% of millennials in Vancouver were most concerned about their salaries, while 48% in Toronto were also concerned. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 36 points on the day to finish at 20,021. The Dow was up 59 points to 32,969. The S&P 500 was up 12 points to 4140, and the Nasdaq was up 50 on the day to 12,431. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $1.15 to $94.89 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 14 cents to $9.33 US. Gold was down 9 cents to $17.51.11 US an ounce, and silver was up a cent to $19.13 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $10.75 per bushel, barley's at $7.88, canola's at $18.98, and corn is at $11.15 per bushel. Live cattle were down 30 cents to $141.33. Feeder cattle were up 33 cents to $181.23, and lean hogs October contract was down $2.53 to $90.38. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 77.11 US. Recapping one of our top stories, a 24-year-old Lethbridge man who was reported missing on Wednesday morning was found dead Wednesday afternoon in the River Valley. Lethbridge police, along with search and rescue, were down at Indian Battle Park early on Wednesday afternoon looking for Kyle Zadnik. His family had not heard from him since Monday and were concerned about his well-being. Zadnik's death is not considered suspicious, and police will not be releasing any further information. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe blasted Ottawa federal workers, saying those workers have trespassed on farmers' land. Political reporter Brian Lilly will have details next. And listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you.
Here's today's Bridge City News community calendar. Discover how Lethbridge has played an important military role in the preservation of world peace and security by visiting the Lethbridge Military Museum at the Vimy Ridge Armory at the Lethbridge Airport. The museum is open to the public each Wednesday from noon to 4 p.m. Special arrangements for other times and days can be made by calling 403-892-6531. Admission is free, but donations are gratefully accepted. For more information, visit lethbridgemilitarymuseum.org. Lethbridge Sport Council's Outdoor Roving Gyms program is taking place Tuesdays behind Nicholas Sharon Arena and Thursdays alternating between Henderson Lake Park and Legacy Park from 10 to 11 a.m. This program is for kids ages 5 and under and their caregivers. Come and enjoy an hour of fun and get active. Registration is required and space is limited. For details and to register, visit lethbridgesportcouncil.ca/roving gyms. And that's today's Bridge City News community calendar.
A new battle appears to be brewing between farmers in Western Canada and Ottawa. This one involves federal government workers trespassing on farmland in Saskatchewan to collect water samples. To talk about this in more detail is political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly, who joins us once again from Toronto. Brian, what specifically were these government workers looking for?
Well, some of the initial reports said that they were looking for nitrate levels in water samples in a farm area near Pence, Saskatchewan. This came to light for most of us after a tweet by Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe saying that he'd written to the federal government asking them to stop this, saying that the workers from Environment and Climate Change Canada were trespassing, that this was something that shouldn't be done. Now, Environment and Climate Change Canada says their workers were not trespassing, that they've been collecting water samples like this for a long time, that it's not related to nitrate levels, that they were trying to collect water samples for Health Canada. So a bit of confusion there, a bit of back and forth. According to officials with the Saskatchewan government, they first learned of this last Wednesday, and then they changed the law about trespassing in Saskatchewan by an order in council. That's an executive order by cabinet to include the government in right of Canada or persons in right of Canada, meaning a government worker could be considered trespassing. Now, it's a bit of smoke and mirrors. They could have been found trespassing regardless of this change, but they're obviously taking this seriously. Perhaps it's a bit of bluster from Scott Moe, but part of the ongoing heating up fight between prairie farmers, the governments that represent them locally, and the central government in Ottawa. As Sylvain Charlebois, the food professor, likes to say, farming in Canada is losing out to progressive urban voters who have a very different view of how the world should work. And there's a lot of worry that that's what's behind whatever these environment and climate change workers were doing on that farm in Penn, Saskatchewan.
Now, is there any news on the federal government's plans to have farmers reduce nitrous oxide emissions from fertilizer?
No, this is what some people are wrongly calling the fertilizer ban. It's not a fertilizer ban, even in its most horrific form. And I don't think this is a good idea, but it is a plan to say that they want to reduce emissions from fertilizer of nitrous oxide by 30% by 2030. Most farmers and industry people I talk to say, sounds great, but we can't do that based on how we're operating now without reducing fertilizer use. So right now it's still a voluntary reduction. There is, of course, worry that it would become mandatory. The government has a discussion paper out that you can send your comments in. So I'd recommend anybody that is concerned about this, especially if you're a farm operator of any sort, send them in by August 31st. You have 1 week left. And of course, if you're interacting with government, make sure that you're not cursing, you're not yelling, that you're clearly explaining your position. Because as I've been speaking with farmers, they've been saying, look, we're willing to reduce our emissions because that means reducing our fertilizer use, but we're already doing the best practices. We're doing that in most places. We're trying to bring along people who aren't doing that. Fertilizer is one of our most expensive inputs, but the government just doesn't seem to want to listen to those. And they say, whatever you're using now, cut it by 30% in the next few years. In torpedoes, so and so. They want an absolute reduction, and the industry is saying you've got to go in a different direction.
It just blows my mind how Ottawa's attacking our farmers, the bread and butter of society. I mean, without farmers, we don't have the food here, Brian. Now, more controversy coming from Ottawa this week over a federal contract given to a Montreal group to hold anti-racism workshops. Now, what's interesting, one was scheduled in Calgary in a few weeks, but the program was canceled over what many say are racist comments by the lead organizer.
Yeah, and I want to give a shout out to journalist Jonathan Kay and Mark Goldberg, who's a bit of an activist. He has a day job, but he's got this as a passion. They really were pushing this online, Twitter specifically, saying, hey, you guys gave this contract out. Have you seen what this guy's been saying? And it percolated for a week or two in the online world. And then the minister heard about it and said, okay, we've got to investigate this. And then they eventually cut it, but it took a while, and it took longer than it should have. The contract was given to a group called the Community Media, I believe it's Community Media Action Center, CMAC is the short for it. And, but the lead organizer was out there saying the most horrific things about Jews, the most horrific things about Black people, saying that French is an ugly language. Weird, he lives in Montreal, and he used a derogatory term that we would all know, an amphibious creature, to describe French people, and said that those people have a low IQ of about 77. So it's often been described as this guy's anti-Semitic. No, he's more than that. And in his comments, Minister Ahmed Hassan, who's in charge of this file, rightly called them vile and xenophobic. I think that's the right thing, and I don't think this guy should have been anywhere near anti-racism training. I have lots of questions about that concept as a whole, I'll say the minister, got to the right spot. I'll say he should have gotten there sooner.
So how does a contract like this go to someone who made such vile comments in the past?
A lot of mistakes along the way. This was a government grant of $133,000 that was given out in September 2021. What were we doing politically in September 2021? We were having an election. But, just because the grant was given out then doesn't mean they applied then. These things take time. So it started out under Canadian Heritage. That's who funded this program. And that the minister then was Stephen Guilbeault, currently the environment minister. The minister in charge of diversity at the time, which announces such grants, was Bardish Chagger. She's no longer in cabinet. Well, since then, we had an election and we had a cabinet shuffle. Pablo Rodriguez is the heritage minister, and Ahmed Hussein had diversity and inclusion attached to his housing duties. Kind of a weird combination, but that's what it is. Nobody did the proper vetting. Nobody Googled this guy. Now, there have been attempts by the government to say, we want CMAC to explain how they hired such a fellow. Well, Laith Marouf, the man who made these vile comments, effectively is CMAC. He and his wife are the organization. They have some supporters, they have people on their boards, but the mailing address for the group is his home. The phone number for the group is his personal cell number that he was putting out online so that people could contact him when he was doing TV interviews with places like Press TV. That's the propaganda channel in English for the Iranian regime. This guy, a quick Google search would have fixed this. Liberal MP Anthony Housefather said that he took the vile comments. As soon as he heard about them, he took them to Minister Hussein and said, you've got to do this. And it wasn't until media questions started to arise, thanks to the work of Jonathan Kay and Mark Goldberg, that the minister said, we'll investigate. Then they said, well, it took time because the contract was with CMAC, not Laith Marouf. They are one and the same. So a bit of, covering your butt, I would say, is what the government's been engaged in. This never should have happened.
Brian, every single premier in Canada has been asking the Trudeau government for help in regards to health care, in particular a funding increase. Why has Ottawa refused so far?
They've refused because Justin Trudeau likes to say that he will do things differently than Stephen Harper, but he won't actually do it. Before the 2015 election, he called what Stephen Harper had proposed, which was reducing the annual increase in healthcare funding to 3% plus inflation and population growth. He described that as a massive cut. He campaigned against the $36 billion cut that he claimed was going on, except that so-called cut didn't take effect until 2017. By the end of 2015, Justin Trudeau was in power. He could have changed it back to the 6% annual growth in health spending. He didn't do it. Instead, he told the premiers, you can take it or leave it. I remember speaking with Saskatchewan Premier, then at the time, Brad Wall, leaving a meeting very disappointed because he'd been led to believe it was going to be something different, and it wasn't. So this is a government that likes to say that they believe in healthcare, that they're the champions of it. They're not full and equal partners like they claim to be. And this week, their big showcase that they care about healthcare was to announce a chief nursing officer. Now, Trudeau supporters online cheered it and said, oh, this is exactly what we need. I don't know why, Hal. This is going to be a bureaucratic position. This is not a nurse that's going to care for a single person for a single minute. This is not a comment on the woman who's got the job. This is comment on the position, a bureaucratic position at Health Canada, an organization with 11,000 employees. They don't run a single clinic or hospital. They don't give anybody care. They're bureaucratic paper shufflers. And now we're going to add this chief nursing officer. I'm sure they're going to have a chief of staff or a top, executive assistant making a hefty salary. This position alone will have a salary of probably over $300,000 a year. On and on and on. It's empire building within the bureaucracy, which Trudeau seems to like, while denouncing premiers for not providing proper care.
MPs on the Commons Transportation Committee grilled Minister Omar Gabra about serious problems at airports and land borders. Now, the minister actually said there was no evidence that the ArriveCan app caused delays. Seriously?
Yeah, it's like he's being willfully blind. He could talk to the union that represents the Canada Border Services agents. Now, the Liberals love to say how much they support unions, they back unions. This union has been saying for a while, look, the only reason you've got over 90% compliance with the ArriveCan app is because our members are the IT desk for everyone that shows up, and they've got their phone in their hand, and they don't have it filled out right. They're not sure how it works. It's been glitchy for them. This isn't just a case of seniors and people who don't speak English or French not being able to work it. I think we discussed last week, there are people who are tech savvy who've shown up, filled out everything. They're fully vaccinated. They have no symptoms. And ArriveCan is saying, go quarantine for 2 weeks. Well, all of these things are causing the backups at the airports and the customs halls. Then you look at the land border crossings, and any land border crossing that has serious traffic levels, they've got the same issues. It's a glitchy app that causes problems. And last week when he was saying this, as he's before committee saying it, I went on the government's website. Government of Canada maintains a website that tells you the travel times out of Canada at land border crossings and the travel times in. I think there were some delays at Coutts and in Surrey for leaving Canada. But everywhere else, it was 5 minutes, 9 minutes. Coming back in, you could find an hour and 10 minutes out in Surrey, I believe it was. It was about 40 minutes at Coutts. It was 57 minutes at different places, 47 minutes. These are long lines. To sit in line just to go across the border, if you've done it before, I've done it before, it's normally just snap, 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 and you're through. Maybe you wait 5-10 minutes. That's normal. No, now it's 45, 50, an hour and 10 minutes. And what is causing that to get back into Canada? It's the ArriveCan app. Tourism groups, chambers of commerce, border city mayors across the country have said this is a problem. The only people that say it's not a problem, Omar Gabra and anyone who's a member of the Liberal Party.
Brian, the CPC leadership is just around the corner now, September the 10th. Let me ask you something. Is it still Pierre Poilievre's to lose?
It is, and here's the great unknown. The last I heard, now this is numbers that are about a week old, Hal. Last I heard, it was only about 40% of ballots had been returned to Deloitte, the firm that's collecting them, tallying them, and will deliver results to the Conservative Party on September 10th. Only 40%. Now, so there's that huge number of 675,000 memberships sold. That means 675,000 people can vote. Well, for 40%, that's still over or in around the area of 300,000. I'm doing math in my head while I'm talking, not the best thing to do, but it's still a significant number. It's going to be huge, but there's still a lot of ballots not out there. Will this lead to upsets? Will this lead to surprise? Probably not, but it's one of those, I don't know, like we're sitting there wondering how many more ballots, because you've only got 2 weeks now? How many more? Actually, no, the ballots have to be in by Tuesday, September 6th. So you've got less time. How many ballots are sitting on kitchen counters, in a drawer, on a desk in an office? And people are saying, oh, well, I don't need to. Either my guy's not going to win or my guy's definitely going to win. There's a lot of those. And if it stays that way, there might be a rush at the last minute. But if it stays that way, who knows what kind of surprise we'll see. I still think Pierre Poilievre would win it, but does it take more than one ballot? Does it take 2 or 3? As I've said before, with such a complex voting system and now all these unknowns, it leaves a lot up in the air.
We see a lot of attacks from Jean Charest online, specifically on Twitter, against Pierre Poilievre. So how would that relationship be repaired, should Poilievre win? And would Charest even stay with the Conservative Party?
Oh, come on, Hal. The attacks inside the Conservative Party started each and every time with Pierre Poilievre before anybody else got in. He was the first person to launch, and he attacked his opponents as either criminals or liars or not real conservatives, they're liberals, before they even entered. It was part of his shock and awe campaign. So there's no way that Poilievre or his supporters can complain about any attacks coming back his way, because they have been far fewer than what Pierre himself has launched. It's been part of his strategy. And the reason for that is they watched that Maxime Bernier and Peter MacKay, the front runners in the last 2 leadership races, didn't win like they expected. And I've told you before, if you don't do very well on the first ballot, it becomes harder to win on the second, third, and subsequent ballots. So they've had this very purposeful strategy of attacking from the beginning. They're still attacking, although Pierre is turning more towards Justin Trudeau. You saw his Breakfast with Justin video that's done very well online. As far as Jean Charest, look, I don't think Pierre Poilievre wants him in the Conservative Party. He's made it clear that he doesn't think Charest is a conservative at all. The problem is if he tells everyone who supported Jean Charest or Patrick Brown or Scott Aitchison that you're not a conservative either, then that becomes problematic for the party in trying to grow and win an election. One of my favorite sayings is winning in politics is about addition, not subtraction.
Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.
Well, here in southern Alberta, agriculture is the order of the day and naturally impacts every family in the region. Dairy farming is lesser known and talked about than some more visible ag sectors, but we wanted to check in with a local dairy farmer who's also the chair of Alberta Milk, Stuart Boovy. Thanks so much for joining us today from Barnwell, Alberta, all the way out in Barnwell.
Good morning.
Great to have you on. Okay, so Stuart, we hear a lot about ranching and feedlots around here, of course. So in your mind, what sets dairy farms apart from cattle operations?
Well, generally a different breed, first of all. It tends to be Holstein. There is also Jerseys and other breeds in southern Alberta, but it tends to be Holstein. So that would be one thing. The other one is, there are lesser numbers, I would say. There's about 150 dairies in southern Alberta, 490 in all of Alberta. So that, like you say, a little bit lesser on public perception-wise, I suppose. But I guess that would, and we're definitely a different industry as far as genetics and livestock.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so would you say that there's a need for more dairy farms in Canada?
Not more dairy farms, I would say, no. Production is, before COVID was always going up. The last 2 years it's leveled off just because of consumer demand and consumer issues. So right now, milk production in Canada is basically, it's growing at about 1% to 2% per year. That's what it averages.
Wow. Okay, so at the very basics, what does Alberta Milk do and who does it serve?
So Alberta Milk is a producer driven industry. So I've been a producer my entire life. I've been in this current location for 27 years. So the board of directors is made up of all producers. You have to be a producer to be on the board. Alberta Milk, what it does, it does many things. One of it is it's actually it coordinates milk receiving, milk quality, transporting milk to producers, raw milk to processors, I should say. Takes care of on-farm animal care. It does many, many things, but all, it's a producer-run organization.
Wow. Okay. So the dairy farming in southern Alberta, would you say that it's more of a multi-generational family business, or are they owned by large corporations? What are we looking at here?
It very much tends to be multi-generational, stay in the family type business. That's certainly my roots. My father started in the 1960s in BC. That's very, very typical. Some of the farms, I know there's one west of Lethbridge, has been over 100 years in business. It really tends to stay in the family just because it really affects your life, I guess is what I would say. It's 7 days a week, 365 days a year. If you're not born into it, you'd probably look and go, why would I want a dairy farm? But if you're born into it, it has a different draw to you, I guess, is what it is. And then, of course, in southern Alberta, we also have the Hutterites that quite a few of them have dairies as well, which is obviously multi-generational and doesn't move, obviously. So
Definitely. So are you then moving your milk into other organizations that maybe then produce cheese, or is that all one and the same of the dairy industry?
So currently in Western Canada, we don't have a large cooperative. So what Alberta Milk does is coordinates milk transport to processors. So in Canada, there's 3 major processors, and then there's a myriad of smaller ones and some on-farm processing and other things. But the 3 major ones take about 75 to 80% of the milk produced in Canada, and that's also in Alberta. Currently in Alberta, we're a little bit short of processing. So sometimes some of our milk goes east or west, depending on the day and the week. And we coordinate with other milk boards in Western Canada to take that milk. That's obviously, we work very well with our other Western milk boards, and we work nationally as well, but certainly on milk processing, we work as a Western group, the 4 Western provinces. So what we do is about a month to 2, well, hopefully a month in advance, we have all the loads of milk destined for their processor. There's processor orders, and then we fill them. So that's how dairying works. So we, as producers, we do not process our own milk. We sell it to processors.
Okay, there you go. You answered my question. I was always kind of curious about that. Now, in this industry, you hear of something called the quota system. So maybe explain why this is important to dairy farming families and Canadian consumers, and maybe also how the quota system works.
So it's fascinating that how you asked the question. Actually, dairying around the world is on a quota system, actually, if you really get down to it. Here, the reason it gets named differently in Canada is it was put in place in the 1960s, and it's actually run by the CDC, the Canadian Dairy Commission. So it's actually federal, and that's what differentiates us from other countries in the world. Most dairy systems, I would say, in the world now are run by the processor. That the processor wants so much milk, and they contract, which is the same as quota. It's just a different name. But anyways, going back to Canada, quota is just a producer can buy from another producer a market share is what it is. So that's actually the whole name. It's market share quota. And what you do is say like my own farm, I have a quota that's basically through Alberta Milk, and I have a certain deliverable amount of milk that I'm allowed to produce in a day. And that's transferred farmer to farmer. And that's what they call the quota. Now, what Alberta Milk does is if I would want to sell my quota, I would put it on the market and another producer could buy it. The only thing fascinating about quota is that the provincial boards actually control it. So if the market gets bigger, like I mentioned to you before, if it gets 2% bigger, then there's 2% more quota that can go into the system. That is not sold. That's distributed amongst producers, or we start new producers. So that's how that all works, and that's all mandated to the provincial boards, and that's one of the things that the provincial board does do.
Wow.
Is we have a general manager and staff that deal with producer issues on that level. But that's all mandated through federal legislation, and that's why sometimes we're targeted because it's a federal thing, and there's long-standing agreements, interprovincially and things like that.
Lots of red tape, I'm sure.
Yeah. Which we're very much working on, trying to eliminate some of the red tape, just because it becomes onerous. So
a little bit cumbersome, I would imagine.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But it's fascinating that in other jurisdictions and other countries, it's very similar. It just doesn't have it doesn't have the same reputation for whatever reason. I'm not sure why, but anyway.
Interesting. Okay, well, you mentioned other countries. So there has been talk of countries like the US and New Zealand wanting to get their products into our markets. But is this a good idea for Canadians?
Well, COVID taught us a few things. One is supply chains. So the downside with milk is if you want to move it long distances, it becomes really tough to do because milk is a perishable product. So it becomes very, very tricky to move milk long distances. That's why in Canada, milk is produced in all 10 provinces, just because it seems like a great idea when things are going well, but when you get a supply chain problem, which COVID did, and other things can bring it on, weather, anything, So bringing from other countries, while it seems like a good idea, is much more difficult than it actually seems.
Yeah, I can't imagine any benefit to having dairy products come in from New Zealand or someplace else when they can be produced right here at home.
For sure. And what it is we've mentioned a little bit about the Canadian Dairy Commission. It gets targeted because we have pricing set nationally, and the U.S. targets that because our return comes only from the marketplace. So I only make money from what the consumers pay. Other jurisdictions tend to have all sorts of programs which are not from the price of milk, but they have other programs that get money into the hands of producers, and that's where it gets murky and it gets tricky, and why you get trade deals and trade negotiations that while we can produce milk cheaper, well, where are you making your money? Is basically, I guess, when you get into the details, and it gets very complicated.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, we've heard too that U.S. lobbyists are proposing that Canadians would pay less for their dairy products, but is that just their way to lobby to open up a new market?
Absolutely. It's absolutely what it is. Because what happens is, and we've just seen it even in COVID, I mean, I'm sure you're aware in the Fraser Valley, also they were shorted with milk just because the farms were flooded, and and then there was COVID issues on trying to haul milk interprovincially. Well, they tried to get milk out of the U.S. It was 50% higher than the Canadian price.
Okay.
So it's just fascinating that they want to open the market up, and then once you've eliminated Canadian dairies, your milk price would be actually much higher.
Oh, wow. I'm just curious too, how different is the U.S. dairy product to what's produced in Canada? Is there a difference?
Well, they have some different rules that they adhere to. Something on quality, they are allowed to have somewhat poorer quality. I wouldn't say it is poor, but they're allowed to. So there's that difference. Our regulations are much tighter, which I'm very much in favor of. Even as a producer, I think we need to make sure that our quality is of the highest standard, rather than even medium. I want to use the right word. I wouldn't say, not high quality, I guess.
Of course. So what makes the Canadian product more high quality then?
We have regulations as far as bacteria levels and stuff like that in the raw milk that are more strict than other jurisdictions. Okay. Even though I would say the majority of the milk is nowhere near limits, like the high limit, it's still allowed. So that's one difference. The other one is they are allowed to use growth hormone in the U.S. that we're not allowed to use in Canada. So that's an animal that's been restricted for probably 20 years already, and at least 20, close to 25, I guess, in Canada. It is illegal to use in Canada. So we're not allowed to use it on our dairy animals. So that's another difference.
And when it comes to feed for your dairy cattle, how much of an impact does the type of feed have on maybe taste of the product? I know with eggs, like in the US, you'll see the yolks are more yellow than in Canada. They're almost an orangey color, and it's because they're corn-fed compared to wheat-fed. Is there anything similar with cattle and with milk, with dairy
well,
cows?
It certainly can be affected. I know, like I said, I have a long history in that. In the dairy industry, I know my parents, they would feed, waste like cauliflower or things like that, and you will taste that right away. But now, because of just the size of farms, we tend to grow our own feed, or certainly some of it. So most cows are fed a pretty similar ration, I would say, as far as, in southern Alberta, I feed alfalfa. In, say, British Columbia, where I'm originally from, they feed grass just because of the climate. But then most cows, most dairy animals in Canada, I would say, get silage, corn as well. So that really makes the milk taste pretty much the same.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting.
Well, and again, back to our processing end, obviously we have to work with our industry stakeholders, with our processors. And of course, they like the same across Canada if they could get it, right? So I would say you would have to be a pretty picky dairy eater to notice the difference on milk taste across Canada. I'm not saying that, maybe there's places in the world that it would taste different, but I'd say in Canada, pretty much tastes the same.
Okay. So the feds right now are proposing fertilizer restrictions. Would this affect dairy farming at all?
Absolutely. Yes. Yep.
And how?
Yeah. This might be a long answer. So, yeah, but
brace myself.
brace yourself. Yeah. It's really handy to go after fertilizer, and they're actually going after fertilizer emissions, which are not even measured, right? And say, well, we're going to cut fertilizer use by 30%. Well, as a farmer, that's a unique challenge, but I'll tell you right now, that will increase prices. The reason fertilizer gets used is it's an efficient way to grow more feed per acre. That's what it is. So if you say you want to use less, that's fine. But then the cost per acre goes up, which translates right into a higher cost of milk in my industry.
Okay, and then the consumer will probably feel that in the end.
For sure.
Oh, right when inflation is hitting us all too.
Well, and the problem with, and I understand, I've personally had meetings with the federal environment minister, who is certainly, very much in favor of restricting fertilizer use or whatever. But the problem is that they go by world numbers and by about emissions, which is a dangerous game to play. Because I would agree that we should limit fertilizer emissions. Doesn't mean you have to limit fertilizer use. You just got to make sure it all gets used properly, which is, easy to say and a little bit more difficult to do. While you need farmers involved is really, that's what I do. That's my whole career, is trying to make, okay, you want us to use less fertilizer and emit less, we'll figure out a way to do it. Don't worry, because, fertilizer is expensive.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for that insight. Really appreciate it. It looks like we are about out of time, but we really appreciated having you on today, Stuart.
Anytime.
Absolutely. That was Stuart Booby, the chair of Alberta Milk. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.